Growing up, our house was like a military camp. My father, a college teacher, ran a tight ship. My older sister Sarah was the perfect child, obedient, studious, and always eager to please. Me? I was the wild card, the one who always pushed the boundaries. "Carol, sit up straight," my father would bark during dinner. "A lady doesn't slouch." I'd roll my eyes and straighten my spine, only to slump down again the moment he looked away. It was a constant battle of wills. My mother, though less vocal, was equally strict. She'd purse her lips disapprovingly at my choice of clothes or friends. "What will the neighbors think?" was her constant refrain. Despite the suffocating atmosphere at home, I managed to carve out a bit of freedom for myself. I started dating Jake when I was 16. He was 19, in college, and everything my parents would disapprove of. We kept it secret, stealing moments together whenever we could. Life seemed to be looking up. I had plans to go to college, to finally escape the suffocating grip of my parents' expectations. But fate, it seems, had other plans. It was a few months after my 18th birthday when I started feeling sick in the mornings. At first, I brushed it off as stress from my upcoming exams. But as the days went by, a nagging suspicion began to grow. I still remember standing in the tiny bathroom of a gas station, staring at the little plastic stick in my trembling hands. 2 pink lines. Positive. I was pregnant. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to figure out what to do. I knew I had to tell Jake, but every time I picked up the phone, my courage failed me. Finally, I couldn't put it off any longer. We met at our usual spot, a small park hidden away from prying eyes. Jake was all smiles when he saw me, but his face fell as soon as he noticed my expression. "Carol, what's wrong?" he asked, reaching for my hand. I pulled away, wrapping my arms around myself. "I'm pregnant," I blurted out. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake's face went through a range of emotions: shock, disbelief, and then, fear. "Are you sure?" he finally managed to say. I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. I took 3 tests. They were all positive. Jake ran his hands through his hair, his eyes cold. "You need to get rid of it." "An abortion, Carol. It's the only way. We're too young for this. It would ruin both our lives." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was Jake, the boy I thought I loved, telling me to abort our child like it was nothing more than an inconvenience. "Get out of my sight," I hissed, turning away from him. He left without another word, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the weight of the decision I now had to make. Telling my parents was even worse. I waited until after dinner, when my father was in his usual spot in the living room, reading the newspaper. My mother was knitting, and Sarah was there too, hovering in the background. "I have something to tell you," I said, my voice shaking. My father lowered his newspaper, eyeing me suspiciously. "What is it, Carol?" I took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The explosion that followed was worse than I could have imagined. My father's face turned an alarming shade of red as he yelled about shame and disappointment. My mother burst into tears, wailing about what the neighbors would think. Sarah just stood there, her face a mask of shock and disgust. "You will get an abortion," my father declared once he'd calmed down enough to speak coherently. "We'll find a discreet clinic. No one needs to know about this mistake." Despite my initial reluctance, the constant pressure from my family wore me down. A few days later, I found myself sitting in a sterile doctor's office, my mother and Sarah flanking me like prison guards. The doctor, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, reviewed my charts with a frown. She looked up at me, her eyes full of concern. "Carol, I need to inform you of something important," she said gently. "Given your medical history and certain risk factors, if you proceed with an abortion, there's a high likelihood that you may never be able to have children again." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Never have children again? The choice suddenly became crystal clear. "No," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "I'm not doing it. I'm keeping this baby." My mother gasped. Sarah rolled her eyes. But I stood firm. The drive home was tense and silent. As soon as we walked through the door, my father was there, expectant. "Well?" he demanded. "She wouldn't do it," my mother spat. "After everything we've done for her." My father's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful little," he cut himself off, taking a deep breath. When he spoke again, his voice was cold and final. "Get out," he said. "Pack your things and get out of this house. You're no daughter of mine. I won't have you embarrassing this family with your condition." My mother nodded in agreement, her eyes hard. "You heard your father. Go." Sarah just stood there, silent and judgmental. Tears streaming down my face, I ran to my room and threw some clothes into a bag. As I headed for the door, my father's voice stopped me one last time. "And don't think about coming back. As far as we're concerned, you're dead to us." The door slammed behind me, the sound final and devastating. I was alone, pregnant, and homeless. In desperation, I called the only person I thought might help, my Aunt Linda. She and Uncle Bob had always been the black sheep of the family, living in another state and rarely speaking to my parents. "Carol? What's wrong, sweetie?" Aunt Linda's voice was warm and concerned. Through tears, I explained everything. There was a long pause after I finished. "Where are you now?" she finally asked. "Outside our house. They kicked me out." Another pause. "Stay right there. We're coming to get you." The drive to Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob's house was long, but it gave me time to process everything that had happened. Their house was modest but welcoming. As soon as we arrived, Aunt Linda went into full mother hen mode, fussing over me and insisting I eat something. Uncle Bob carried my bag to the spare room, which would now be my room. "It's not much," he said, setting the bag down, "but it's yours for as long as you need it." I looked around the small, cozy room and felt a lump in my throat. "It's perfect," I whispered. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of doctor's appointments, discussions about my future, and adjusting to my new life. "We've been thinking," Aunt Linda said one evening over dinner. "We want to help you continue your education." I looked up from my plate, surprised. "What do you mean?" Uncle Bob leaned forward. "We've set aside some money over the years. We never had kids of our own, so we thought we'd use it to help you go to college." I was speechless. After everything that had happened, the idea of still being able to pursue my dreams seemed impossible. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Aunt Linda smiled. "We believe in you, Carol. This baby doesn't have to mean the end of your dreams." And so, with their support, I enrolled in a local community college, majoring in business management. It wasn't easy, balancing classes with doctor's appointments and the increasing discomfort of pregnancy, but I was determined to make it work. I also found a job as a waitress at a local restaurant. The owner, a kind woman named Maria, was understanding about my situation and flexible with my hours. It wasn't much, but it allowed me to start saving for the baby and contribute a little to Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob's household. The day my son was born was the most terrifying and beautiful day of my life. After hours of labor, I held him in my arms, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob were there, beaming with pride like grandparents. "What are you going to name him?" Aunt Linda asked softly. I looked down at my son's face, so peaceful in sleep. "Daniel," I said. "It means God is my judge. Because no matter what anyone else thinks, I know I made the right choice." As I settled into motherhood, juggling a newborn with college classes and work, I often thought about my parents and Sarah. Had they heard about Daniel? Did they ever regret their decision? But I pushed those thoughts aside. I had a new family now, one that accepted me and loved me unconditionally. One day, as I was scrolling through social media during a rare moment of downtime, a post caught my eye. It was from Sarah. My heart skipped a beat as I read it. "Excited to announce that Jake and I are engaged. Can't wait to start our life together. The photo showed Sarah, beaming, her arm around Jake, the same Jake who had abandoned me and our child. They looked happy, carefree. Like nothing had ever happened. I felt a surge of emotions, anger, hurt, betrayal. But as I looked over at Daniel, peacefully playing in his crib, I realized something. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. I had everything I needed right here. The years flew by in a blur of diapers, textbooks, and late-night study sessions. My last semester was particularly challenging. I was taking extra classes to graduate on time, still working at the restaurant, and chasing after an energetic 3-year-old. Graduation day was a whirlwind of emotions. As I stood in line, waiting to receive my diploma, I scanned the crowd. Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob were there, of course, beaming with pride. Daniel sat on Uncle Bob's shoulders, waving excitedly every time he caught my eye. The real surprise came at the graduation party Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob threw for me. As we were celebrating, Maria, my boss from the restaurant, pulled me aside. "Carol, I have a proposition for you," she said, her eyes twinkling. "I'm looking for a new restaurant manager, and I think you'd be perfect for the job." I was stunned. "Me? But I've only ever been a waitress." Maria waved her hand dismissively. "You've been much more than that. I've seen how you handle difficult customers, how you organize the staff, how you balanced work and school and motherhood. That's the kind of dedication and skill I need in a manager." It was a dream come true. A stable job with better pay and regular hours, exactly what I needed for Daniel and me to start our new life. The next few years were a whirlwind of positive changes. I threw myself into my new role at the restaurant, learning everything I could about management and business operations. Daniel started school, growing into a bright, curious boy who loved to read and play baseball. It was at one of Daniel's Little League games that I met Tom. He was there with his son, Michael, who was on the opposing team. We struck up a conversation, and I was immediately drawn to his kind eyes and easy laugh. "Single dad?" I asked, noticing he was alone. He nodded, a sad smile crossing his face. "Widower, actually. Michael's mom passed away when he was a baby." My heart went out to him. "I'm so sorry. It must be tough." "It is," he admitted. "But we manage. How about you? Single mom?" I laughed. "Is it that obvious?" Our relationship developed slowly. We were both cautious, having been hurt before and with our children to consider. But as the months passed, I found myself falling for Tom. He was kind, patient, and Daniel adored him. A year after we met, Tom proposed. It wasn't a grand, theatrical gesture, just a quiet moment in his backyard, with our boys playing nearby. Our wedding was small and intimate, just close friends and family. As I walked down the aisle, Daniel proudly by my side as the ring bearer, I caught Aunt Linda's eye. She was crying, but her smile was radiant. Life with Tom, Daniel, and Michael settled into a comfortable rhythm. And a couple of years after our wedding, we were blessed with another addition to our family. Our daughter, Emily, was born on a warm spring morning. As I held her in my arms, with Tom, Daniel, and Michael gathered around the hospital bed, I felt a sense of completeness I'd never experienced before. I loved all three of my children equally, Daniel and Emily, my biological children, and Michael, my stepson. They were all my kids, regardless of blood ties. One evening, as Aunt Linda was over helping with the kids, we were startled by a familiar voice coming from the TV. There, larger than life, were my parents. My father was standing at a podium, waving to a cheering crowd. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, "John Williams announces candidacy for mayor." I felt my heart stop. It had been years since I'd seen my parents, even if only on a screen. My father looked older, his hair grayer, but his eyes still held that stern, determined look I remembered so well. As we watched him speak about family values and moral integrity, Aunt Linda's face contorted with anger. "Hypocrites," she spat, her voice trembling with rage. I turned to her, shocked by her outburst. "Aunt Linda? She took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving the screen. "There's something you need to know, Carol. Something they've hidden for years." What she told me next shook me to my core. Many years ago, before Sarah and I were born, my parents had their first child, a boy. But he was born with severe physical defects, without legs. Instead of embracing their child, they left him at the hospital, afraid he would embarrass them. I felt a whirlwind of emotions: shock, anger, disbelief, and a profound sadness for the brother I never knew. "Why didn't you tell me before?" I asked. Aunt Linda's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Carol. I should have. But after what they did to you, I didn't want to add to your pain." That night, after the kids were in bed, I made a decision. I needed to find my brother. With Tom's support, I hired a private investigator. Weeks passed, and finally, we got a lead. My brother was alive, and against all odds, he had thrived. He was a successful writer, married with children of his own. He had been adopted by a wealthy family who had given him every opportunity to succeed in life. Meeting him for the first time was surreal. Despite his physical differences, I could see echoes of my own features in his face. His name was James, and he greeted me with a warm smile and open arms. "I always knew I had a biological family out there somewhere," he said, his voice gentle. "I just never expected to find a sister." Over the next few months, James and I grew close. I introduced him to my family, and he welcomed us into his. His wife, Sarah, a coincidence that made me laugh, and their 2 children became a part of our extended family. 20 years had passed since that fateful day when my parents kicked me out of their house. Life had moved on, bringing its share of joys and sorrows. My eldest, Daniel, was now 19 and had just started college on a baseball scholarship. I couldn't have been prouder of the young man he'd become. One lazy Sunday afternoon, as I was scrolling through news articles on my tablet, a familiar face caught my eye. It was my father, looking older but still carrying that air of self-importance I remembered so well. The headline read, "Mayor John Williams discusses family values in exclusive interview." Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the video. For a few minutes, I listened to my father espouse the importance of family, integrity, and moral values. And then, the interviewer asked about his children. My father's face softened into what I recognized as his public sympathy look. "I have one daughter, Sarah. She's the light of our lives. Tragically, we lost 2 of our children. The pain never really goes away, but it's made our family stronger." For days, I seethed with a quiet rage. How dare they? How dare they erase me, erase James, and paint themselves as tragic, sympathetic figures? Then, almost as if fate was intervening, James called. "Carol, guess what? I'm doing a book signing in our hometown next week. It would mean the world to me if you could come." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I told James, a plan already forming in my mind. The following week, I found myself back in the city of my childhood. As I walked the familiar streets, memories flooded back, some good, many painful. I pushed them aside, focusing on what I needed to do. The book signing was being held in the grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel. As I entered, I saw that James hadn't exaggerated, it seemed like half the town was there. Local celebrities, business leaders, and politicians all mingled, waiting for the event to begin. And there, in the front row, sat my parents and Sarah. My father, now the mayor, looked every inch the distinguished politician. My mother, elegantly dressed, smiled and nodded at acquaintances. Sarah was sitting next to them. They hadn't seen me yet. I took a seat near the back, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. James rolled onto the stage in a wheelchair, to enthusiastic applause. He looked confident, at ease in the spotlight. As he began to speak about his book and his life, I saw my parents nodding sympathetically. "I was born with a severe physical disability," James was saying. "No legs, and other health issues. My biological parents abandoned me at the hospital, unable or unwilling to care for a child with my needs. I watched my father's face carefully. He showed no sign of recognition, no hint of shame. Just the carefully crafted mask of a politician expressing appropriate concern for a constituent's sad story. James continued. I was fortunate. I was adopted by a wonderful family who gave me every opportunity to succeed. But I always wondered about my birth family. Who were they? Why did they give me up? The room was silent, all eyes fixed on James as he continued his story. I stood to the side, my heart racing, waiting for the moment that would change everything. Then, James smiled, his eyes twinkling with a mix of mischief and determination. But that's not the end of our story, he said. You see, I found my family. My sister, Carol, is here with us today. He turned towards me, extending his hand. Carol, would you join me on stage? A collective gasp rippled through the audience as I stepped into the spotlight. I saw recognition dawn on many faces. After all, I had grown up in this town. But the most striking reactions came from the front row. My parents' faces drained of color, their expressions a mixture of shock, fear, and dawning comprehension. Sarah, my sister, looked like she'd seen a ghost. They knew their carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. My parents stood abruptly, clearly intending to make a hasty exit. But I wasn't about to let them escape the truth again. Mom, Dad, please stay, I called out, my voice echoing through the now silent room. I think it's time we had an honest conversation, don't you? They froze, trapped by the eyes of the entire audience. Slowly, reluctantly, they sank back into their seats. I took a deep breath. Many of you knew me growing up. You knew my family. But there's a lot you didn't know. A lot that's been hidden for far too long. And then, I told them everything. How my parents had abandoned James at the hospital, ashamed of his physical differences. How they'd hidden his existence, building their reputation on a foundation of lies. And then, history repeated itself, I continued, my voice growing stronger. When I got pregnant at 18, they didn't offer support or understanding. They demanded I have an abortion, ignoring the doctors who said it could leave me infertile. And when I refused, they kicked me out. Their own daughter, pregnant and alone, thrown away to protect their precious reputation. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw looks of disgust directed at my parents, who seemed to shrink in their seats. For years, I've heard them talk about family values and morality, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But their actions tell a different story. They abandoned 2 of their children when we needed them most. They erased us from their lives to maintain their perfect image. The room erupted into chaos. People were shouting, some at my parents, others at each other. Journalists who had come to cover a simple book signing were now frantically taking notes or speaking rapidly into their phones. In the midst of the uproar, I locked eyes with my father. The man who had loomed so large in my childhood now looked small, defeated. My mother was openly weeping, while Sarah sat frozen, her face a mask of shock and confusion. In the days that followed, the story exploded. It was all over the local news, then national. My father's political career evaporated overnight. The man who had preached about integrity and family values was exposed as a hypocrite of the highest order. His position as mayor became untenable. He resigned within a week, citing personal reasons. But everyone knew the truth. The college where he had taught quickly distanced themselves, terminating his position. Amidst all the chaos, one thing became clear, my sister Sarah had made her choice. She stood firmly by our parents, refusing to acknowledge the truth of what they had done. You've ruined everything, she hissed during a brief phone call. Don't contact me again. You're dead to me, just like you're dead to Mom and Dad. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. A few days later, I received a call from a number I hadn't seen in over 20 years. It was Jake, Sarah's husband, and the father of my eldest son. Carol? His voice was hesitant, almost sheepish. I've been thinking about us. About what happened. Sarah and we can't have children. And I thought, maybe we have a son together. We could be a family. I couldn't help but laugh. Jake, you made your choice 20 years ago. You abandoned me when I was pregnant with your child. You married my sister. And now, just because you can't have children with her, you think you can come back to me? No, that's not how this works. But Carol. No, Jake. I have a wonderful husband and a beautiful family. I don't need you, and I certainly don't want you. Goodbye. I hung up, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. However, the surprises weren't over. The next day, I received another unexpected call. This time, it was from Jake's parents. Carol, a tentative voice asked. This is Martha, Jake's mother. We just found out about Daniel. Is it true? Do we have a grandson? The conversation that followed was emotional and eye-opening. It turned out that Jake and my parents had told them I'd had an abortion and run away from home. They'd spent years believing their grandchild never existed. We'd like to meet him, Martha said, her voice trembling. If that's okay with you, of course. We understand if you don't want us in your lives. I thought about it for a moment. These people weren't responsible for Jake's actions or my parents' lies. They were victims of the deception too. Okay, I said finally. I'll talk to Daniel and see if he's open to meeting you. The meeting between Daniel and his paternal grandparents went surprisingly well. There were tears, hugs, and a lot of catching up to do. Daniel, always compassionate, welcomed them with open arms. In the months that followed, life settled into a new normal. James and his family became regular fixtures in our lives, filling our home with laughter and love. Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob doted on all the grandchildren, biological or not. As for my parents and Sarah, I heard snippets of news now and then. They'd moved away, trying to escape the scandal. Part of me felt sorry for them, but I knew I'd done the right thing in telling the truth.
I'm Catherine, a 32-year-old psychiatrist with a deep passion for helping people through their mental health journeys. Today, though, it's me in need of calm as I stand in front of a mirror, adjusting my veil for what feels like the 100th time. My hands tremble, not from nerves but pure excitement. I've dreamed of this day for so long, and now it's finally here, my wedding day. You look absolutely stunning, sweetie, my mom says, her eyes brimming with tears. I take a steadying breath, smiling at her. Thanks, Mom. I still can't believe it's happening. Before I can take it all in, my best friend and maid of honor, Sarah, bursts into the room. The beach looks like a fairy tale. You and Mark are going to love it. Just hearing Mark's name makes my heart flutter. He's not just my fiancé, he's my soulmate, my rock, and the kindest pediatrician anyone could ever meet. As we head to the ceremony, I spot my cousin in the crowd, giving me a quick wave while juggling her triplets. She looks frazzled, but I smile back, silently thanking the universe that this is a child-free wedding. The ceremony is a dream. Mark's eyes light up as I walk down the aisle, and the love between us feels palpable. We exchange vows, seal it with a kiss, and just like that, we're husband and wife. The reception is in full swing, and I'm floating on cloud 9 as I make my rounds, thanking everyone for coming. That's when I hear it, the unmistakable sound of children crying. I turn and see Melissa, looking far too overdressed, handing off her triplets to my mom. Can you watch them for a bit? I really need a mom's night out. Thanks, you're a lifesaver. And before anyone can protest, she's gone. My mom looks at me, panicked. Catherine, I cut her off with a forced smile. It's fine, Mom. Let's just keep them quiet, okay? But as I turn back to my guests, I can already feel my perfect day starting to unravel. The triplets are wild, knocking over centerpieces, smearing cake on pristine white tablecloths. Should we do something? Mark whispers, his brow furrowed with concern. I squeeze his hand. Let's try to enjoy the night. Melissa will be back soon. But as the hours tick by with no sign of her, my patience wears thin. This was supposed to be our day, and now it's turning into a circus. I glance at my new in-laws, whispering and pointing at the chaos. And I can't help but wonder, Where is Melissa? How could she do this to us? Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a drama that would change everything. The DJ plays our song, but I can barely hear it over the shrieks of Melissa's triplets, Ethan, Emma, and Evan, running wild on the dance floor. So much for a romantic first dance. I'm so sorry, sweetie, my mom says, breathless as she chases after Ethan, who's now making a beeline for the cake. I'm trying, but they're just too much. I force another smile. You're doing great, Mom. But it's not okay, not even close. I scan the room, hoping to spot Melissa, but she's nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Mark's parents are huddled together, their disapproving glances unmistakable. Maybe we should help your mom, Mark suggests, worry etched across his face. I shake my head. No, this is our wedding. We shouldn't have to babysit. As the chaos continues, memories flood my mind. Melissa showing up drunk at my college graduation. Melissa borrowing money she never repaid. Melissa skipping our grandfather's funeral to post beach vacation photos online the same day. And me always making excuses for her. She's just going through a tough time. I'd say. She doesn't mean to be like this. But as I watch Emma knock over a vase, sending water splashing onto my aunt's dress, I start to wonder if I've been a fool all along. Dr. Catherine, comes a voice from behind. It's Jenna, our wedding coordinator, looking frazzled. I hate to bother you, but the children have caused some damage to the decorations. The venue is asking about compensation. I close my eyes, taking a long breath. How bad is it? Jenna winces. Significant. The night drags on, and the situation only worsens. Mark's sister corners me at the bar, her voice dripping with disdain. I thought this was an adults-only wedding. If I'd known, I would have brought my kids too. I open my mouth to respond, but what can I say? She's right. This isn't what we planned. This isn't what we wanted. As the last song plays and guests start to leave, there's still no sign of Melissa. The triplets, now finally exhausted, have crawled under a table and fallen asleep. Mark finds me sitting alone, my once perfect hair now a mess. Mascara smudged down my cheeks. Hey, he says softly, sitting beside me. Some wedding, huh? I look at him, this incredible man who deserves so much more than the disaster today turned out to be. I'm so sorry, Mark. This isn't how it was supposed to go. He takes my hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. We're married. That's all that matters. But as we carry 3 sleeping toddlers to our honeymoon suite instead of champagne and roses, I can't shake the feeling that something important has been broken. This was supposed to be the start of our fairy tale, but instead, it feels like the beginning of a nightmare. And Melissa, she has a lot of explaining to do. The morning after my wedding, I'm not waking up to breakfast in bed or stolen moments with my new husband. No, I'm on a mission to find my MIA cousin. After searching the hotel for what feels like hours, I finally spot her, passed out on a lounger in a spa area, reeking of alcohol. Melissa, I shout, shaking her shoulder. Wake up. She stirs, blinking up at me with bloodshot eyes. Kathy? What's going on? What's going on? Are you kidding me? My voice rises with each word. You abandoned your kids at my wedding. Melissa sits up, rubbing her temples. Geez, calm down. It's not a big deal. I just needed a break. Not a big deal? I can't believe what I'm hearing. Your break ruined our reception. The venue is charging us for damages, Mark's family is furious, and… Oh, boo-hoo, Melissa interrupts, rolling her eyes. So your perfect little wedding got a dose of reality. Maybe if you weren't so selfish about not wanting kids there. Selfish? I freeze, stunned. Selfish? You're calling me selfish? Yeah, I am, she snaps. Not everyone can afford babysitters, you know. Some of us are actually parents. And that's when it hits me, the excuses, the manipulation, the complete lack of responsibility. Melissa isn't just careless, she's toxic. We're done. I say, my voice cold. Don't call me, don't text me. We're done. I turn and walk away, ignoring her protests. When I find Mark, he takes one look at my face and pulls me into a hug. You okay? He asks softly. I shake my head. No, but I will be. I told Melissa we're cutting ties. Mark nods. I support you. But are you sure? What about the family? They'll have to understand. I say, the doubt creeps in. We leave for our honeymoon, But the incident hangs over us like a cloud. Instead of enjoying the beaches of Bali, I'm glued to my phone, dreading the family fallout. When we return 2 weeks later, it's worse than I imagined. Melissa's been busy, spinning a web of lies, telling everyone I abandoned her and the kids, saying I've always been jealous of her. I just don't know what to believe, Mom says when I confront her. Melissa seems so upset. And I'm not? I cry. She ruined our wedding, and now she's turning everyone against me. But I see the doubt in Mom's eyes. It's like she doesn't know who to trust anymore. That's when my psychiatrist brain kicks in. If I'm going to fix this, I need evidence. I start documenting everything. Every lie, every manipulative tactic, every instance of neglect I can remember. I reach out to Melissa's ex Tom, who's been fighting for custody of the triplets. I hate to ask, I say, but has Melissa ever left the kids with you unexpectedly? Tom laughs bitterly. Try every other weekend. She says she's going to the store and disappears for days. As I dig deeper, a disturbing pattern emerges. It's not just me. Melissa has been taking advantage of everyone around her for years. Borrowed money, never repaid. Promised favors, never fulfilled. And worst of all, a consistent neglect of her own children. I sit at my desk, staring at the mountain of evidence I've collected. Part of me feels vindicated. I'm not crazy, I'm not overreacting, but mostly I just feel sad. Sad for the kids, sad for our family, and sad for the cousin I thought I knew. One thing's for sure, I'm done being Melissa's scapegoat. It's time for the truth to come out. 6 months after the wedding fiasco, I'm standing in my parents' living room, heart pounding. The whole family is here, including Melissa and her husband Tom. It's time for the intervention I've been planning for months. Thanks for coming, everyone. I begin, my voice shaky. I know there's been a lot of confusion and hurt feelings lately. That's why I've asked you all here today. I take a deep breath and dive in, presenting the evidence I've gathered, text messages showing Melissa's neglect of the triplets, financial records of money she never repaid, testimonies from friends and family about her manipulative behavior. This isn't about revenge, I explain. It's about protecting the kids and healing our family. The room is silent as I finish. My parents look shell-shocked. Tom's face is a mix of anger and relief. Melissa, though, is fuming. This is ridiculous, she shouts. You're all going to believe her lies. But the proof is undeniable. Even Aunt Susan, Melissa's biggest offender, looks uncertain. Honey, Mom says gently, I think it's time you got some help. That's when Melissa snaps. She jumps up, knocking over a chair. You're all against me. I don't mean this. She storms out, slamming the door behind her. The silence that follows is deafening. A week later, Tom calls me. I'm filing for divorce, he says, his voice heavy, and I want full custody of the kids. Can you help? I agree to provide a professional assessment for the custody case. It's not easy, but it's necessary. Over the next few months, Melissa's carefully constructed world begins to crumble. She loses her job due to frequent unexplained absences. Her friends, tired of her constant drama, start to distance themselves. Meanwhile, the family rallies around Tom and the triplets. Mark and I often babysit, giving Tom much-needed breaks. I don't know how to thank you, Tom says one evening as he picks up the kids. I smile, watching Ethan, Emma, and Evan giggle as they put on their shoes. We're family, I say. This is what family does. Slowly but surely, I rebuild my relationships with the relatives Melissa had turned against me. It's not always easy, but it's worth it. 1 year after our wedding, Mark and I decide to host a vow renewal ceremony. It's everything our first reception should have been. Joyful, drama-free, and filled with love. The triplets, now under Tom's full-time care, are adorable in their little suits and dress. They behave beautifully, a testament to the stability they now have. As Mark and I dance under the stars, I can't help but reflect on the past year. I never thought I'd say this, I whisper to him, but I'm almost grateful for what happened at our wedding. He raises an eyebrow. Oh yeah. I nod. It taught me the importance of boundaries, of standing up for myself, and the freedom that comes with letting go of toxic relationships. Mark pulls me closer. So does this mean you might be ready to start our own family? I laugh, my heart full. You know what? I think I am. As the night winds down, I catch a glimpse of Melissa through the window of a nearby coffee shop. She's alone, scrolling through her phone looking lost. For a moment, I feel a pang of sadness. But then I turned back to my loved ones. Mark, my parents, Tom, and the kids, all the people who stood by me through thick and thin. I realized that this is what real family looks like, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The story of Catherine, Melissa, and their family has come to an end. Now, I have a question for you. Do you think Catherine made the right decision by cutting Melissa out of her life completely, or should she have given her cousin another chance? Is there a point where family ties become less important than personal well-being? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hi, I'm Emily, a 30-year-old mom juggling the joys and chaos of raising two energetic toddlers. Packing for a family trip with them is like planning a small military operation. Diapers, snacks, toys, extra outfits, everything double-checked. With our tickets booked for Los Angeles, I was eagerly anticipating some much-needed downtime in the California sun. More than that, I was excited for my sister Abby to finally meet the youngest of my little chaos crew. At the airport, the kids were buzzing with excitement, their tiny faces pressed against the glass as they watched planes take off. "Look, Mommy, it's flying." My eldest squealed, tugging on my hand as I shifted the weight of the diaper bag on my shoulder. "Yeah, buddy, we're flying too," I said with a smile, though my back was already aching under the load of our carry-ons. Andrew had gone to get our boarding passes, but he was taking suspiciously long. When he finally returned, there was a sheepish look on his face that didn't bode well. "I got us checked in, but there's something I need to tell you," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. My stomach tightened. "What is it? Don't tell me there's an issue with the tickets." No, he stammered. "You and the kids are all set in economy, but I upgraded myself to business class." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. "You did what?" I couldn't hide the disbelief in my voice as I stared at him, waiting for some explanation that would make this make sense. "I've just been feeling really stressed lately, and I thought the extra space would help me relax," he said, his voice trailing off when he saw my expression. "So you're going to relax in business class while I wrangle two toddlers in economy." My voice trembled with a mix of hurt and rising anger. He tried to explain that it would be better for everyone this way, but even he didn't seem convinced. "You mean better for you?" I shot back, the weight of handling everything alone suddenly feeling unbearable. He opened his mouth to respond, but stopped, stepping back as I gathered our things. "Come on, kids, let's go find our seats," I said with forced cheerfulness, trying to mask the turmoil inside as we headed to the gate. Andrew followed at a distance, the gap between us growing in more ways than one. The flight was just as exhausting as I feared. Juggling a squirmy 3-year-old and a teething 1-year-old in the cramped space of economy was a test of patience and endurance. Every time I thought of Andrew reclining in his business class seat, sipping coffee while I wrestled a spoon away from my youngest before it could fling peas everywhere, resentment simmered. "Mommy, why can't I go see Daddy?" my eldest asked, his voice rising above the hum of the engines. "Daddy's sitting in a different part of the plane, sweetie," I explained, forcing a smile. The hours dragged on, filled with brief naps and bursts of crying from the kids, and nearly from me. Every glance toward the front of the plane made my heart sink a little deeper. When we finally touched down in Los Angeles, Andrew caught up to us, his face filled with regret. "I'm really sorry, Emily. I thought a quiet flight might help me manage my anxiety better," he began, reaching for the bags. I pulled the suitcase away. "Anxiety or not, Andrew, you left me alone when I needed you. You chose comfort over your family." My voice was steady, but inside, I was unraveling. His apologies faded into the background as I guided our kids through the crowded turmoil, my mind made up. At Abby's house, I was welcomed with open arms, a warmth I didn't realize how much I'd been missing. "You look exhausted, Em," she said, concern in her eyes as I set down the luggage and the kids ran off to explore. I told her about the flight, my voice breaking. "He just left us. Abs upgraded himself and left me to struggle with the kids." Her frown deepened. "That's not the Andrew I remember." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted, the weight of my decision sinking in. But this was the last straw. It's not just about the flight. It's been building for a while, and I need to think about what's best for me and the kids now. Her silent nod was all the reassurance I needed. As the night fell and the kids slept peacefully, the hard conversations that lay ahead loomed large in my thoughts. During the days that followed, I slipped into a routine at Abby's house. a routine that, for the first time, didn't include Andrew. Mornings were filled with the sound of my children's laughter as they played in the sunlit garden, a stark contrast to the tense silence that had crept into our home back with Andrew. While the kids napped or played, I spent hours talking with Abby or sitting alone, reflecting on the patterns that had shaped my marriage. One evening, as Abby and I sat on her porch, the California breeze offering a gentle respite from my inner turmoil, a memory surfaced. "Remember last Christmas?" I said, stirring my tea absently. "Andrew decided to go on that golf trip with his friends right in the middle of our family plans. It's always been about what he needs." Abby listened, her face a mix of sadness and frustration. "It's been happening for too long, Emily. Maybe it's time for a change." Her words echoed in my mind long after, keeping me awake that night. By morning, I had made up my mind and called the counselor Abby had recommended. The sessions that followed were like slowly unraveling a knot. Each conversation revealed how I had sidelined myself, always bending to Andrew's needs, his schedule, his desires. "It sounds like you're always the one making concessions, Emily," the counselor said during one session, her voice gentle yet probing. "Yes," I admitted, surprising myself with the clarity of my own words. "And I'm tired of feeling like a secondary character in my own story." Each session brought a growing sense of empowerment, a slow reclaiming of my worth and desires. It wasn't just about Andrew upgrading his seat on that flight. It was about all the times he had put himself first, leaving me to manage the consequences. Armed with this new perspective and Abby's unwavering support, I made a decision that had once felt unimaginable. I called Andrew, who had returned to our home, waiting for us to come back as if things could just go back to normal. "Andrew, we need to talk," I began, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I can't do this anymore. I'm filing for divorce." There was a pause, a moment where I could almost feel his world shift. "Emily, please," he said, his voice pleading. "Can we talk about this? Maybe go to counseling together." But I had made up my mind. It's not just about the trip, Andrew. It's about being respected and valued, and I haven't felt that way in a long time. The conversation that followed was painful, the weight of my decision hanging heavily between us, final and unyielding. As I hung up the phone, I felt an unexpected peace wash over me. It was the right decision, not just for me, but for my children. They needed to see their mother strong, valued, and respected, something I could only truly embody if I stood up for myself and our future. That night, as I tucked my children into bed under the soft glow of their temporary room at Abby's, a quiet resolve settled within me. Tomorrow would bring challenges, no doubt, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them, knowing I was finally on the path I needed to be. Life as a single mom wasn't without its hurdles, but each day I woke up in my own space, a home slowly transforming into a sanctuary for my children and me. With each morning that began early, greeted by the sound of little feet padding across the floor and the day's first calls for cereal and cartoons, I felt a surge of strength pushing me forward. Our new routines, breakfast, playtime, bedtime stories, became rituals we shaped together, filling our days with small joys and shared responsibilities. Co-parenting with Andrew brought its own set of challenges, a delicate dance of boundaries and compromise that often tested my resolve. The first few exchanges were stiff, thick with unspoken regrets and what-ifs. But as the weeks turned into months, a structure started to form, one that allowed our children to love both of us without feeling caught in the middle. "Can I bring this to Daddy's house?" my eldest would ask, holding up a toy or a book. "Of course," I'd reply, my heart squeezing with the bittersweet reality of our new normal. It was important to me that they felt connected to both of us, despite the distance and the changes in our family. Andrew and I found a way to communicate that focused entirely on the well-being of our kids. We set up regular meetings to discuss everything from school events to health concerns. There should be consistency in the routines between both homes, I proposed during one of our discussions, and to my relief, Andrew agreed. "Yes, let's keep things as stable as we can for them," he said, showing that he too was learning to put our children's needs ahead of our past conflicts. Looking back on my journey, from the painful unraveling of my marriage to the tentative steps toward a new life, I marveled at how far I had come. The decision to end my marriage had been weighed down by fear of judgment, of upheaval, of failing on my own. Yet, here I was, not just surviving but thriving. My days were mine to design, filled with laughter, love, and yes, the occasional tears, but most importantly, they were authentically mine. I knew there would be more challenges ahead, more hurdles to overcome. But I also knew that within me was a reservoir of strength that had been tested and found true. I was more than a wife, more than a mother. I was Emily, and I was enough. As I tucked my children into bed, their sleepy faces glowing softly under the warmth of their nightlight, I felt a profound sense of peace. "Good night, my loves," I whispered, lingering in the doorway as a soft smile curved my lips. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was no longer afraid. With each new day, I was building a life not just for my children, but for myself, a life filled with purpose, respect, and joy. And no matter what lay ahead, I knew we would face it together, as a family reshaped but unbroken, strong in the face of change and hopeful for the future. That concludes Emily's journey from betrayal to newfound independence. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Do you think personal happiness should always be prioritized over trying to preserve a family unit, especially when kids are involved? Share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Hi, I'm Lisa, a 19-year-old college student who's had to face some tough lessons early in life. Growing up, I always felt like the odd one out in my family. Ever since my dad lost his job shortly after my older sister, Stella, was born, my parents have struggled financially. They never hid their favoritism toward her. Stella was the golden child, and me, I was just there. My mom never worked, and our house always felt empty, not just of money, but of love and warmth too. From a young age, I understood that I wasn't really wanted. Every dinner was centered on Stella, her needs, her future, while I sat quietly, unnoticed. My accomplishments, no matter how small, never seemed to matter. The only person who truly got it was my cousin, Sam, who lived nearby. Like me, he was the black sheep in his family, always left on the sidelines. "When are you going to realize you deserve better, Lisa?" Sam would say during our secret meetings at the old park between our houses. His words were a balm to my bruised heart. Things only got worse when Stella moved back home, pregnant. The house, which already felt small from the lack of love, now suffocated me with expectations. "Why can't you be more helpful? Stella needs us," my mom would scold, as if her situation was my burden to bear. At 16, I had enough. With Sam's encouragement, I made a decision that would change my life. "You can stay with me," Sam offered one night as we sat beneath the stars, my world crumbling around me. "We'll figure this out together." Living with Sam wasn't easy. He had his own financial struggles. But together, we faced the world as allies, not alone. He showed me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who stands by you when everything else falls apart. As Stella's due date approached and the demands at home grew louder, I packed my few belongings and left a note. I didn't want another confrontation, so it was brief, just enough to let them know I was safe but gone. I remember looking back at that small, dimly lit house, feeling a mix of fear and relief. The fear was for the unknown ahead. The relief was from breaking free of the chains that had held me down for so long. That night, as Sam and I sat in our cramped but warm new place, I knew I had taken my first real step toward independence. It was the start of a new chapter, one where I was no longer just a shadow in someone else's spotlight. This was my fight for a life where I was seen, heard, and valued. Living with Sam felt like taking my first breath of fresh air. It wasn't easy. We scraped by, counting every penny and sometimes barely keeping the lights on. But it was ours. This little life we were building was founded on mutual respect and support, not obligation or guilt. Our break came unexpectedly. One chilly evening, Sam got a call. I watched his face shift from confusion to shock and then to relief. His late grandparents, whom he spoke of with such love, had left him a small inheritance and a house in a quiet part of town. "We're moving, Lisa," he said, his voice light with disbelief. "And hey, no more leaky faucets or creepy landlords." He tried to joke, but I could see the tears in his eyes. Sam had always been the strong one, but I knew how much this meant to him. Security, something he'd given me when I had none. With his inheritance, we moved into the house. It was old and needed work, but it was more space than we'd ever dreamed of. While Sam worked on fixing it up, I threw myself into my studies. The scholarship I'd earned felt like my ticket to a future I never thought I could have. A degree, a career, and maybe one day, a way to help others like us. I worked part-time at a local cafe, managing to contribute to our modest budget. During breaks, I'd sit in the back with my textbooks, studying over cups of leftover coffee. Mrs. Johnson, the cafe owner, took a liking to me. "Keep hitting those books, Lisa. You're going places," she'd say, her words fueling my fire. Our life wasn't luxurious, but it was ours. We had movie nights, laughing over spilled popcorn, and deep conversations about our futures. Sam wasn't just my cousin, he was my partner in this journey. One evening, as I looked around at our mismatched furniture and the walls we'd painted ourselves, I realized how far I'd come. From a house where I felt like a stranger, to a home where I was an essential part. I was no longer the unwanted child. I was a woman carving out a life for herself, with a cousin who believed in me when no one else did. This new life wasn't just about survival, it was about thriving. As I closed my books late one night, preparing for another round of exams, I felt a surge of pride. Sam and I had defied the odds, carving out a small piece of happiness. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew we were ready to face them together. The day Stella reached out came as a surprise. We hadn't spoken in a while, and her message had a warmth and nostalgia that was a stark contrast to the coldness of our last interactions. "Hey Lisa, I've missed you. Can we meet?" "I'd love to catch up," her message read. Perhaps naively, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could be different now. Motivated by a mix of curiosity and a longing for some semblance of familial connection, I agreed. As I approached the house, everything looked the same, but the emotions it stirred were different. Apprehension mixed with familiarity. Stepping inside, the familiar smells and sights brought a strange sense of comfort. Stella greeted me with a hug more affectionate than I was used to. "It's so good to see you, Lisa. Thanks for coming," she said, her voice seemingly sincere. The evening began pleasantly enough, small talk and shared memories. It almost felt like old times, and for a brief moment I let my guard down. But as we sat down for dinner, the atmosphere shifted. I could sense there was an agenda lurking beneath the surface. "You know, Lisa, we've been struggling a lot lately," Stella started, her tone taking on a calculated edge. "Mom and Dad are really behind on rent, and we thought, maybe you could help." Their eyes were all on me, expectant, as if I somehow owed them this. The request hit me hard. After all the years of neglect and favoritism, they now wanted my help because they assumed I could afford it. "I'm sorry, but I can't do that," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside. Mom's face hardened, her tone turning sharp. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By abandoning your family?" Her accusation felt like a slap in the face. "Everything you've done," I retorted, barely holding back the frustration. "I was never part of this family the way Stella was. How can you ask this of me?" The dinner ended abruptly. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I think I should go," I said, the finality in my voice mirroring the finality of my decision. As I walked out and closed the door behind me, it felt like more than just leaving the house. I was walking away from the manipulative ties they had tried to wrap around me once again. On the drive back, my emotions were a tangled mess. There was clarity in what had happened, but it was bittersweet. I was free from their expectations, but painfully aware of the deep rift that now lay between us. When I got home, Sam was waiting, ready to listen. "I told them no, Sam," I began, the words tumbling out. He nodded, his expression understanding, offering the comfort I needed. We sat on our old couch, one of the few relics from his grandparents, and I poured out everything. "It's like every time I think we might be able to be a family, they show their true colors," I said, feeling the familiar sting of tears. "You did what you had to do, Lisa. You can't keep setting yourself on fire to keep others warm," Sam said softly. His words were simple but profound, and they helped calm the turmoil inside me. That night, I lay awake, reflecting on everything. The false hope of reconciliation was just another reminder of why I had left in the first place. I realized then that my independence wasn't just about putting physical distance between me and my family. It was about emotional and financial independence too. Sam and I had built a life of mutual support, and I wasn't about to trade that for a family that only saw me as a means to an end. In the weeks that followed, Sam and I focused on our future. He had recently been approached by a local school to help direct their annual musical, a passion project that was both exciting and daunting. His enthusiasm was contagious. We spent evenings discussing set designs and audition plans. "I think this could be a big thing for me, Lisa, and I want you to be part of it every step of the way," Sam shared one night, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "And I will be, Sam, just like you've always been there for me," I promised, feeling proud of the man who had stood by me through it all. That painful encounter with my family had become a catalyst for deeper reflections on my own life and aspirations. I was more than just the unwanted daughter. I was more than just a survivor. I was a scholar, a partner, and a friend. College was challenging, but fulfilling. I discovered a passion for social work, a field that resonated deeply with my own experiences. Each day was another step away from my past and toward the future Sam and I were building. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving, shaping our own lives. My resolve only grew stronger. Breaking free from my family's expectations wasn't heartless, it was brave. As time passed, the guilt that had once gnawed at me began to fade. I realized self-preservation wasn't selfish, but necessary. My journey wasn't just about creating distance from the toxicity. It was about embracing a life built on mutual respect and love, given freely and not used as currency. Reflecting on everything, I knew the decisions I'd made, however tough, were the right ones for me. And with Sam by my side, I felt hopeful and ready for whatever lay ahead. Together, we weren't just breaking free from our pasts. We were moving toward a future full of possibility. Months had passed since the dinner that severed the fragile ties with my family. The silence that followed was both a relief and a source of reflection. One quiet afternoon at the cafe where I worked part-time, I heard unexpected news about Stella. A mutual acquaintance, seeing the concern on my face, reluctantly shared that Stella had been evicted and had to place her daughter with a friend. The news hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything, knowing that my niece was indirectly suffering pained me deeply. That evening, I sat on the back porch of the house Sam and I shared, lost in thought under the same stars that had witnessed so many of our late-night conversations and dreams. The cool night air brushed against my skin as I pondered my potential role in my niece's life. It wouldn't be immediate, the wounds with my family were still fresh, and I was only beginning to build a life I could be proud of. But the thought of being there for her in the future, when I was more settled, felt like the right path. As if reading my thoughts, Sam joined me on the porch. I turned to him and said, "I was thinking about my niece. Maybe someday I'll be part of her life when I'm ready, when I can offer her something positive." Sam nodded, his understanding clear. "You'll make that decision when the time's right. And it'll be the right one, because you'll make it with your heart." His support, as always, was unwavering. Our life together moved forward with a gentle, promising momentum. Sam's work with the school musical was flourishing, bringing him new joy and fulfillment. It was wonderful to witness his passion come to life. My own studies in social work were equally rewarding, and I found myself increasingly drawn to working with children and families who had faced challenges similar to my own. As I looked ahead, the future seemed bright with possibilities. I was building a meaningful career surrounded by a community that valued and supported me, and I was in a relationship that taught me what it truly meant to love and be loved unconditionally. Reflecting on the journey that had brought me here, from the shadows of a painful past to the light of self-discovery and independence, I felt a deep sense of gratitude and determination. The road hadn't been easy, but it had led me to a place of strength and self-assurance. With a heart full of hope and eyes wide open to the future, I was ready to embrace whatever came next. No matter the challenges or opportunities ahead, I knew I would face them with courage, bolstered by the love and respect Sam and I shared. This wasn't just an end to the hardships, it was the beginning of something new and beautiful. A life truly my own, shaped by my choices, my values, and my dreams. As this chapter concludes, it raises an important question. Is it possible to forge a meaningful relationship with family members who have previously caused harm if circumstances have changed? I invite you to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.